Welcome to the Healthy Life podcast that doesn't hold back. We discuss all subjects from wellness, healthy eating, and fitness. Welcome to Healthy Life.
Hi, I'm here today with Beckie, and she is going to talk to us about life with type 1 diabetes. Hi, Beckie.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for coming down today. So, what age were you when you first discovered that you had diabetes, and what were the signs for you?
So I found out I was diabetic when I was 18 years old. So I'm now 31. So it's really funny. I was actually working in retail at the time, and I wasn't really feeling myself, to be honest. I really wasn't feeling myself. So I was working in retail. I was on a till. I kept finding myself really, really thirsty. And you know when you get to that point where you have a drink, but then that thirst just goes.
Yeah.
But I kept having to have another drink and then another drink, and then obviously then I find myself needing to go to the toilet more, and I'm thinking, right, this is not normal. So
Quenching it.
So like in a 8-hour shift, I've probably had a 6-pack of Coca-Cola as well as like a 10-pack of Cadbury Sun, which is just not normal for, you know.
Yeah.
So I then woke up the next day, and then I actually woke up and I had conjunctivitis in both of my eyes. So I was like, right, I've got to go to the doctor's, got to get some eye drops. And then I brought it up with my doctor and I said, do you know what? I keep finding myself really thirsty, and this thirst just doesn't go. Like my tongue literally feels like sandpaper. That's how it felt. And he was like, oh, okay. And I said, I keep going to the toilet, obviously, I'm weeing a lot more. And he said, okay, we'll do a couple of tests. So then he did a urine dip, noticed that I had high ketones in my wee. So basically I've got a lot of sugar floating around in my bloodstream. And then he did a glucose test, and then my blood sugars were 20.8. So at this point
What should it be?
So it should be, for a non-diabetic, it should be really anything from 4 upwards to about 12, the highest, I would say.
Wow. So
maybe even 10, to be honest with you.
very high.
So he said to me 20.8, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh, I don't know what this means. I haven't got a clue. Like, I've come in wanting eye drops for my eyes, not knowing that, like, you know, I've got signs of diabetes. So he was like, you need to go to hospital straight away. So went to hospital. Got told about, you know, what's going to happen. Had a lot of tests. So basically an MOT on my head to my toes, making sure I haven't done any further damage, because then they check for something called DKA, which is, I don't know the actual, I can't remember what it actually stands for, but they just basically want to make sure I haven't done any further damage.
Yeah.
So they basically got the insulin pumping into me. My pancreas wasn't working properly anymore, so I needed the insulin. Then I learned how to do my injections, which were 4 to 5 injections a day. Obviously very scary at first.
Yeah.
And then, you know, that just was my life, you know, a week before my 19th birthday, and yeah, massively changed things. So
And what's the difference between, because type 1 and type 2 diabetes?
So type 2 is more genetics, it's age, it can run in the family, it's diet related, you know, but you can actually reverse type 2 diabetes. Now, type 1 diabetes, I've always been asked, is it genetic? Is there anyone in the family? I haven't got anybody in the family that's type 1 that I know of.
Wow.
My granddad, he had type 2 diabetes, but he was 83 when he was diagnosed, and, you know, passed away at 87, so that was just type 2. But, yeah, the type 1, unfortunately, it is, you know, you're stuck with it.
It's for life, isn't it?
It's a lifetime condition, so...
Yeah. So
Yeah.
technology has changed over the years. For example, my husband had a friend in America who used to have this little device attached to them, and it would beep whenever their sugar levels were too high or too low. I mean, that was 20 years ago. What do you have to do now do you have something that beeps when your levels change, or do you have to just test regularly?
So when I started out, obviously doing the whole like injecting, blood sugar monitoring, I'd just have to do a finger prick. Now technology's changed. I actually have something called a Libra sensor. So it's a sensor that it's an application I place onto my arm, and it actually syncs in onto your mobile phone. So it will beep if it's high, beep if it's low. It's amazing.
And it's something you can easily remove, put back on, everything.
Yeah, so it stays on for 2 weeks. There's no... Do you know, in the past there would be times, even like, for example, if you're looking after your child, you haven't got time to fiddle around with little needles, and then you lose the lancet, and then you lose the strip, and then you've got blood everywhere because you're trying to get your blood sugars reading. But this is so much easier. You literally scan your phone onto your arm, and it tells you your blood sugar straight away. So, and it keeps a good like log as well, and then it goes straight to your diabetic team, and they can keep an eye on it.
So if it tells you like your level's too high or too low, what do you then have to do?
So once it sets off like an alarm and it says it's too high, then you know I've got to give myself some extra insulin. And then if it's too low, then that's when in my handbag I always have my emergency supply of sugar. So I have my dextro tablets, I might have some jelly babies.
So is there a moment where you go, oh, it's low, I can have a chocolate bar or something like that?
Or somebody might be like, right, Becky, you don't seem yourself right now, you're a bit hangry. And I'll be like, I'm having a hypo, I need to eat. Because my blood sugars will then drop. I'll feel a bit shaky. You can get a bit hot.
Yeah.
You can sometimes obviously feel a bit faint. You can pass out, so you just got to keep on top of it.
Yeah. So obviously, it obviously affects your everyday life, but like when you leave the home when you've got a baby, you have to take everything but the kitchen sink. Nappies, wipes, bottles, change of clothes, because we know that accidents always happen.
Yeah.
What do you have to think about when you leave the house? If you're just going for a few hours, I'm guessing not too much for worry, but if it's for a day, couple of days, or even going on holiday, especially when you go abroad, what do you have to consider?
There is a lot you have to think about. You have to just make sure you've got enough insulin pens. You've got to make sure you've got the needles, because obviously every time you inject, you change your needles, so you've got to make sure you've got enough to cover you. Again, the sensors are reliable because they can last 2 weeks, but then if you are probably going away, probably keep another one in your bag, because they can catch and fall off.
Yeah.
And then it's just having your emergency supply of sugar. Literally can't go anywhere without knowing that you've got those. So yeah, it is quite a lot to remember.
Does it affect things like when you exercise, or just how does it affect that?
Yeah, so your blood sugars can, obviously exercise is really good for you, good for your blood sugars, but then you need to keep on top of it again, because if you can obviously have a really perfect blood sugar, and then you can go and exercise and your blood sugars will then drop. So you've got, it's just a balance game all the time.
Yeah.
It really is. But it's frustrating, because you think, well, I really want to exercise, I want to get fit, I want to do this, but then your blood sugars get in the way, and then they drop, and then you feel a bit rubbish, but then obviously you perk up after like 20-30 minutes. So
you have to plan a lot. I imagine when this first started that it was like learning to drive a car. It was a lot. And then, but now, it's like once you learn to drive a car and you drive and you can ride a bike, it's second nature. Is this all just second nature to you now?
Yeah, it is. I would say managing it is, but I'm always learning something new. So every time I obviously see my diabetic team, there's always something new that they suggest, as like you said about what kind of like devices and
What's
stuff I use.
What's advanced over the years, yeah.
My next thing will probably be an insulin pump. So then that will then stop me having to actually think, right, I've woken up, I've got to do my insulin injection. Whereas I just type it in, and then it pumps it straight into me.
So would it be something that's automatically in the the device you've got, and it will just go, oh, this has happened, let's do this. So
yeah. But there's always training, there's always something new to learn with it. So I'm always learning.
That's a question actually, because my ex is pregnant now, so she's got diabetes while she's got it, and she's getting like sore patches where she keeps injecting. Yeah. Any tips that you kind of like avoid, apart from her driver areas?
So has she got gestational diabetes?
All I know, she's got diabetes, pregnant, but that'll go when she's give baby.
Yeah, it's quite common, isn't it? Something that happens during pregnancy.
She's obviously doing the finger pricking, so obviously I would keep rotating where you're doing that on your fingertips. I mean, I do remember in the past, as I've obviously got a little one, the nurse actually said, you can always do your toes or your earlobes. And I looked at her and thought,
interesting.
oh, okay. But I didn't actually get to that point. But there is obviously other parts of the body where you can just keep rotating those areas.
Yeah.
And obviously doing the insulin for you like almost daily. Is it like 1 or twice a day or just daily?
So I can inject really 4 to 6 times a day.
Okay. Is it just as and when you need to? Do you just get your phone just says you need to?
So I got my set dosages. So I have the 3 morning, afternoon, dinner, and then I have a new morning insulin as well, which used to be an insulin injection that I'd have before I go to sleep, but I now do it in the mornings. They've changed it around, which is working for me. But for example, if I go high, then I'm like, right, okay, I need to give myself some extra insulin.
Does it have any impact? Like on your sleep? I hope that's not a silly question. Is there anything like if you...
Absolutely affects your sleep. Does absolutely. It? So for example, like anybody else can just, lay down, go to sleep, head hits the pillow, that's it. Me, I have to obviously check my blood sugars, and then if they're too low, then you've got to act on it, which then you're having a sugar rush, and then you're like, well, I'm awake now.
That's what I was thinking. It must affect that.
Yeah, and then there's obviously the opposite where you can go to sleep, and then you can actually, your blood sugars can drop in your sleep, which is the dangerous part.
So another question: Does the weather, seasons, does that change? Have any effect on you?
Yeah. So funny enough, so when it's summer and obviously the heat is a lot hotter, I do hypo a lot. So it's just a case of, you can lower your insulin, and then it is just a case of, again, having like the emergency jelly babies, dextrose, just to keep your blood sugars up. But yeah, when you're, for example, for me, if I go abroad, I definitely hypo a lot more.
That must be quite frustrating on some days where here we can wake up, it can be like, oh, it's freezing today, but then by midday it's roasting. So I'm guessing you always have to make sure you got all eventualities packed.
Yeah, it's just amazing how much diabetes actually affects you, from so many different topics.
But
do you find it as still a struggle, even though you've had this for years?
Every day is different.
Okay.
It really is. So again, you can have your good days and you can have your bad days, and I'm sure many people can relate to that. It's difficult. It is, but I think the technology now and the support you can get, and there is a lot of diabetics out there at the moment that are obviously going through the same thing, and there's just such a big community where everyone does support each other. But I don't think I've ever met a diabetic that will be exactly the same as yourself.
Well, it's like everybody's different, aren't they?
Yeah, that's it.
It must be nice though when you do chat to someone who you can relate to, and just you both.
But it's funny, the lead sensor I've got, when I first got it, I thought, I don't want anybody to see that, because it's, it's quite big. It's like a £2 coin size.
Do people think it's a nicotine patch?
I have had people say to me, what's that on your arm? Why have you got a shopping tag inside your top? Like, what is that? And then I kind of think, I'm going to hide it. I don't want people to see. But then I got used to it. And then you see other people out and about and you think, wow, they're like me. So,
you could actually say I'm an Android, it's my charging port.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Beckie. It's really appreciated.
No, that's fine. Thanks for having me today.
Here at SMJ Media Group, we are a non-profit company providing fun, free content for local businesses. If you like our content and would like to support us, please visit buymeacoffee.com/SMJ Media Group and buy us a coffee.